code clone, IntelliJ IDEA, copy, get from version control, Spring Boot. Multiplication quiz 2. And clone. Trust project. This code contains 2 branches. I want to switch branch code simplest because it's easier to explain first. Check out. So I switch it to simplest branch. It is still building. When it finishes, let's run it and see what it does. Run. Here it is. So let's go to localhost 8080 and see what it shows us. So it generated random problem 5 times 9. And if I reload this page, we will see that it is, it will be another problem. So let's do that. Okay. CSS is broken. Let's do Control-Shift-R. So it is refreshed in browser. So what happens with CSS? Why sometimes it is broken? It is because browser maintains local copy of CSS file, and we run different projects on the same address. So /CSS/main CSS is exactly the same file from the point of view of the browser, so it doesn't try to reload it. But when it belongs to several different projects, it may contain different data inside. So we got some random problem, and as you probably realize that it is reload will produce another problem. It is random, and since this program is a server-side program, it should behave appropriately on serving different users. So obviously, different users may receive different problems, so it should match user input with the problem generated to user in order to behave correctly. So how does it do it? One way, brute force way to do it is to insert these 2 numbers as hidden links, hidden inputs inside of the form. So when I click submit, it will submit user input and also these 2 numbers as hidden inputs. This way, you can do calculation on the server side, match it, and you don't have to store it on the server. This would work in simplest cases like this, if you don't need to give a second chance to the user and other options that present in this problem. So in simple case scenarios, you can avoid storing data on the server side by just using hidden inputs. But it doesn't work in general well, because the logic of hidden inputs and data inside of links may become potentially quite complicated. So for this reason, there is a better solution, not better, but different, more general solution, is to have storage on the server side that is matched to browser, particular browser. So programmer can allocate storage, key value storage on the server side, call it session, and store any object inside of this session object as key value storage. So, okay. So any number of objects inside of session object. But obviously, this per browser storage needs to be matched to a browser somehow. So how does it work? It is by default behavior, it is matched by session ID cookie. So if we open developer tools, Control-Shift-I stands for inspection, we will see that there are a few cookies. When you click Application tab, there are a few cookies associated with localhost 8080. Some of them are inserted automatically by IntelliJ IDEA for internal purpose. But one of them, what you see here, it is session ID cookie. I got one more, raw data. It is from the dice roller program. But since they are running on the same address, for the browser, it is the same program. So this is why it is showing raw data cookie. Okay. It survived from a previous lesson in the morning today, when I was explaining cookies. In that example contained cookie. So in this case, I have session ID cookie, and how does it work? When I ask it for session storage from the server in my code, server provided this object where it can store data by key value storage. And at the same time, when the object was provided to me, to the programmer, server generated session ID cookie and added this to response. So when page was sent back to the browser, together with the page, inside of the response, browser got session ID cookie. And browser stored it here. It's session ID. Okay. So if we move it, this is the number. Okay. So when I send some data input, click submit, browser will send my input inside of new request, but besides this input, browser will also send any cookie associated with this address. So browser will send the session ID cookie and even raw data cookie, although it belongs to different program, but for the browser, it is the same program because it is on the same address. So when session ID cookie is received on the server side, and I ask for session key value storage, server will provide me that session object with my key value storage based on received session ID cookie. So if cookie is provided and there is a matching session object matching the cookie, fine, it will give me the session object. Otherwise, it will create empty one and create new session ID cookie. Right. What would happen if, why would it happen when there is no session? It may expire, this is why. Session may expire because there's some default expiration time and that you can overwrite in your code inside of configuration. Application.properties, you can specify expiration time. So if a session object expired and I ask for it, server will provide me an object, but it will be empty. So when I submit 56, in this case, server received 56, and my program was asking for session storage object. It retrieved 1 and 7 from it inside of some other object that I created, and matched answer 7 with 56, obviously mismatch, and program is showing this template, wrong answer. And now I can go to see answer, and it will show me correct one. So again, sending new request is received. I'm asking for session storage object. Based on the cookie, a server give me that session object. I got problem from it, and I'm displaying it. So by default, session object on the server side is matched by the cookie. So let's repeat this thing, and I created 2 times 9, then I give wrong answer. And now I want to break it. So I delete session ID cookie. Okay, so it's gone. And now I click try again, and try again supposed to show the same problem because I'm trying answer for the same problem. Okay? I'm trying to give different answer to the same problem. So I click try again, and it says, oops, your session expired. So what happened? When request came to the server side, it didn't contain session ID cookie because I just deleted it. So server created new session object to me and new cookie. So now it's new cookie. And new session object that was created for me did not contain previously stored data. So my program assumed that session expired. This is why session object doesn't contain stored data because it's a new session, previous expired. And this is why my program is displaying, oops, your session expired. Questions? Okay. Next, session expired. Seems like a reasonable logic, right? Next, I want to repeat this experience slightly different way. I want to delete session ID cookie. I can delete even this one as well and everything, just better. Clean up everything. Yeah. So everything is gone. Okay. So clean up. Next, I'm going back to localhost 8080 and story is repeating itself, right? So I generated the problem. Okay. I asked it for session storage object. It was provided by the system. I put the problem inside of session. Okay. System or server generated session ID cookie, sent response. A response contained the page and cookie. Right? When browser received response, displayed the page, inserted the cookie. Okay? So what is next default behavior? When I enter number will be submitted in new request, and new request will contain session ID cookie so it can match the data. Okay? So let's try it. But I want to mess with it again. I delete the cookie. Now, I enter some number here. What is supposed to be? 4 times 6, 24? Okay, let's do 24. And I submit. Your answer is right, 24. Why does it work? I deleted the cookie. If you look carefully, you will see that session ID is part of the address. But I deleted the cookie. So what is the logic? Server is trickier than just session ID cookie. So let's repeat this experience. And now, but cookie is not here, right? Okay. But it did work because ID was in the address. So it wasn't such easy to mess it up. But remember that when I deleted cookie later on, it did break. It doesn't break only for the first page. So what is the logic behind? When we create the first page, like this, okay, when we go to the first page, server, when I ask server for session ID, server doesn't know if session ID cookie will be accepted by browser or not. because user could turn it off. Okay? So for the first page, when you ask, give me this page, and when I generate this page and I ask it for session storage, server doesn't know if this session ID cookie will be accepted by browser or just discarded. So it has no hope if this cookie comes back or not. But it tries to do it best. So besides sending session ID cookie, it's also view page source, inserting session ID in every link. This is why when I click on any link or click submit button, session ID will still travel to the server side. So it's a duplication in hope that at least one of these will work. Right? So if session ID cookie is not received, it can pick session ID from the link or from, you see, action in this link. Right? So it's a duplication to make sure that it works. Right? But once session ID cookie is received, it knows that that browser does accept cookies and it doesn't need to reinsert this data again and again. Right. So if I turn off cookies in browser completely, it will keep working by reinserting session ID in every link. But if cookies are on, this reinsertion of session ID will stop once server will receive one session ID cookie. And if you delete it on purpose, it will break the logic. Because now it expects that cookies are working, but if you delete it on purpose, it won't work. This is breaking the logic. All right? So by default, maintaining session works with cookies and without cookies. But if you just let cookie go once after this and break it afterwards, like by deleting it, you just destroyed the consistency of the logic. This is why it says it couldn't find session. Okay? So why is it done this way? It's done because API was designed many years ago, and it is default behavior of Java server. And many years ago, like 15 or so, it was quite common when users turn it off cookies because of was kind of privacy, paranoia. But it is not common anymore. People do not turn off cookies right now because they know that if they do turn off cookies, half of the web will not work for us. We cannot log in into Slate. We cannot log in into Facebook. It will be just messages. We cannot log in because cookies are not allowed, whatever. So why it is default behavior for web changed? So it is default behavior of API. But why? Because of security. This option of transferring session ID through links is less secure than cookies, session ID cookie. For this reason, most web applications do turn this off by default because it's less secure. Okay. So for this reason, if we turn off cookies in browser, although servers can imitate this web behavior, it is turned off because of security concerns. Okay. So what did we learn about session? We learned that session, it is object allocated on the server side. It is matched to browser. By default, it is done through session ID cookie. But if session ID cookie is not allowed in the browser, if browser does not take cookies at all, it will just discard them. If server has configured such way that it will continue inserting data into links, it will continue working, but this default behavior is turned off on majority of these web applications due to security concerns. Questions? So let's see how it is implemented in the code. Good news, many of these things are automatic. Good news is that we don't have to match ID inside of session ID cookie or ID inside of the link. It is done behind, under the hood. So when we ask for the object, it would be either matched by session ID, or if it cannot be matched by session ID, it will be just empty object. Okay. So this is how we know. If it's empty, it's probably session expired or mismatched or some. If it contains the data that we want, so yeah, okay, we can use the data. So this is the logic. So let's open the code and see how it is done inside. In my controller, I have quite a few places, methods, because I have different addresses like see answer, check answer, try again address. So this is why I have so many methods inside of controller. Let's start from the top. When we go to slash or new problem address, it will generate new problem. So somehow I need to separate logic or business logic from UI logic. In controller, in templates, it's UI logic. So I decided that I will have a class, call it problem, that contains the data, first number, second number, and answer. I will have a service that will provide random problem with 2 random numbers in it. And this service is injected into controller using constructor injection. So when I need random problem, I just call service, get random problem, and I got the problem. Okay. Next, I will display it into log, and I want to put it into session because I want this to survive between different pages, shown to the same user. So I ask it for the session, and this asking for the session as a parameter works the following way. If session exists and it's matched by session ID cookie or ID inside of a link, it would be previously created object that will contain previously created object. But if it doesn't exist, cool, it will create one, but it will be empty because it's fresh object. So next thing what I do, I will store this problem object inside of the session as key value storage. So this is the key and this is the value. So in order to retrieve it, I will use this key and it will give me the value. So I can store as many objects as I like inside of a session. Okay. And I'm showing template new problem. You see that this method is returning string. It means it's returning template name or redirection address. In this case, it's template name because it doesn't start with word redirect. All right? Now, returning this. But how does it see the problem? Because it needs to display it. Right? The trick is that if we add objects to session objects, like problem, they are visible by default inside of template. So if we open new problem template, we will see that this template, resources template, new problem, is picking data from session. So session.problem, letter A and letter B, so get A, get B, it is first number, second number. All right? And it is submitting user answer. So this is text input that is submitting user answer. All right? Where would it be? Where does it send user answer? It is sending user answer to address check answer. Correct? So when we, where's my browser? Okay. When we what's that, 79, 171, right? 71? No? Okay, let's try 71. Okay. No, it's wrong. 72, okay, 72. Okay, we can try again. But anyway, it submitted data to check answer, right? It submitted data to check answer. And I received the data. I could cheat, I could look it up here, see, because I print this number, print the problem into log. Okay? So user answer was 71. Okay? So I'm here. Not check, see answer, check answer. Okay? So I'm here. I retrieved problem. I printed user answer. So it is 71, what I received, as user answer. Then I retrieved problem from session. Please notice that I need to typecast, because get attribute is returning object, like object as base type for all objects. So I need to typecast it to problem in order to access methods of the problem, like get answer. Okay? So I retrieved problem from session using key. It gave me value. I typecast it to problem class. I have this problem. But I printed it here. Here. Debug, you see problem. This one. But if problem equal to null, it means I couldn't retrieve it. It could happen if session expired, I couldn't retrieve it. So in this case, I display template session expired. But if it's not expired, it is retrieved, I'm printing the problem here. Okay? And I'm trying to check if it is right or wrong. But before checking, I know that every template that I want to use will display user answer. Right answer, wrong answer, it will, the way how I wrote templates, they all display answer, user answer, in this case 71. So for this reason, in order to display user answer, I added to the model. Because what is added to the model will be visible inside of template. So I added user answer to the model, and after this, I'm trying to check if it is right or wrong. So again, I separated business logic to service. Quiz service, get user answer. I provide problem, provide user answer. And this great user answer returns 3 enumeration type of 3 outcomes. So return value of this method is enumeration type. Call it great. Right answer, wrong answer input, arrow. So if it is right answer, I'm displaying template right answer. Wrong, wrong answer. Input arrow, bad input template. Okay. So this is how it makes decisions right, wrong, or whatever. So business logic is inside of quiz service. We will look inside of quiz service next. Okay. What happens here? If I reach this point, I'm throwing an exception should never be reached. So this way, I know that something is wrong. Because it's either session expired, or right, or wrong, or input error. There is no other choice. So it will tell me that something is wrong in my code. Is it optional? No, it's not an optional. If you comment it out, you will see that code is not compiling. Why does it happen? Because this logic, it is too complicated for compiler. Compiler is not sure if this point will be reached or not. Because it's purely like human logic, it's not a machine logic. And if method is declared to return string, compiler needs to be sure that it is indeed returning something. So in order to go around, I could return empty string or something like that, or return some template, no hope that it will happen. Or template, like arrow, internal arrow template or something like that. But it has to be return of something, otherwise it's just not compiling, or throwing exception. In throwing exception, system knows if throwing exception, obviously it's not returning. It's fine. So for this reason, I decided I will throw exception. Another reasonable choice to create an arrow page, internal arrow, whatever, and show template of that. All right. What about these templates? Right answer, wrong answer, bad input. They're quite similar to new problem, and they're quite similar to each other. So let's look up at right answer. I'm displaying data from session, problem from session. I'm displaying user answer, and I have links to new problem and so on. And message, obviously, your answer is right, or wrong, or bad input. All right, questions? So let's open business logic inside of service and see what does it do. Obviously, it is dealing with problem class. Problem class, I designed problem class is just pure data storage, no other functionality, and besides constructor. All data is final. It means once the project is done, you cannot change it. It's final. You assign it, and you cannot change it. For this reason, I have only getters and constructor. It is serializable. What does it mean, serializable? So, new topic. What does it mean, serializable? Serializable, it's a marker interface that tells the system this object can be converted automatically into bytecode, into a sequence of bytes. And if we use just types provided by Java, it's guaranteed to be serializable. If we somehow use external libraries, it won't be serializable to define types. Okay? In this case, we're lucky, and we're lucky in the vast majority of the cases because we use types from Java. And this is extra marker that tells system, yes, it's fine, you can convert it to bytecode, there is no issue. Why it is marked serializable? Remember that this object is stored inside of session, and session it is per browser storage. If server is busy, a little bit of memory per browser may end up a lot. And if it ends up a lot, server may try to optimize handling this memory, and it will try to save data out of memory to hard drive, just to release memory, for operation purpose, right? So if session expires in maybe in a day or a couple hours, depending what settings for the session, and user is not active, maybe makes sense to put it to hard drive as a file. So in order to store this data on a hard drive as a file, you need to convert it into a sequence of bytes. And if it is serializable, server knows that it can easily call write object method of object output stream on that, and it will convert it to bytecode that is going to hard drive. Okay. So it will be two linked streams. One it is file stream, and one it is object output stream. Okay, so it is for memory optimization. It is marker, so yes, you can put it into hard drive. Another option, why it is serializable. The session that you notice here, it is the default session that comes with Java server, like Tomcat server, for example. And this program is using Tomcat server. But Spring Boot itself provides session optimization. And if we use that optimization from Spring Boot, data is not stored in memory or on hard drive, it is stored in database. Which database? Tons of options. Essentially, any database is covered by Spring Boot. So you can push this data into any database at the expense of, obviously, running database server and writing configuration to connect to that database server. So it is optimization because you don't need to use as much memory because it's not in memory or reading, writing there. Files, and optimization is passed to database, and database is optimizing it. It is definitely a choice, but of course, it doesn't come for free. It comes that you need to set up database and set up connection configuration, and it will work. By the way, if you use session provided by Spring Boot related to database, default behavior is not to insert session ID into links. It's only through cookies. So in that configuration, session ID inside of links is turned off by default. And serialization is used to convert it into sequence of bytes, and sequence of bytes is converted into some string accepted by database. Or, depending on database, it could be converted into blob objects, big or binary some object, converted into some internal. So databases do provide option to store objects, binary objects in some internal format. So it depends on database. But anyway, it needs to be converted into a sequence of bytes first, and after this it goes as binary into database. So this is why it's serializable. Questions? So next, remember that what we learned from previous lessons, that server is talking to many browsers at the same time, so user inputs from one browser shouldn't go into conflict with user inputs from another browser, and logic of interaction with one user should be probably not interfering with logic of interaction with another user. Otherwise, we may get into corrupted data situation. So let's see if it is an issue here. Inside of controller, by the way, how do we know if it's an issue? We need to check these things. This part is thread safe, so we're fine. This we don't know because we didn't look inside of the code. All variables inside of methods are thread safe because they're just duplicated per browser, so per request, so they're fine. So let's look inside of this part. Quiz service, random number generator is thread safe. We know it is from libraries. It is thread safe. All other things are inside of methods, so they're thread safe. Next, so it's fine. What about session? We know that session object, it is per user. In this case, we cannot run into conflicts between data of one guy and data of some other user on network, right? But what about two windows opened in the same browser, or two tabs opened in the same browser? They definitely share session ID cookie and the same session ID, because it is the same browser. What if user try to manipulate two browser windows reasonably close in time? Potentially, it may cause conflict, because a browser will send two requests, potentially could be close in time, and update could be close in time on the server side. It's extremely unlikely situation, but it's web, and server may potentially serve, I don't know, really a lot of people, right? And if there is a tiny chance of this happen, it will happen eventually. Okay, it will happen eventually. So we may need to deal with this situation as well. User opening two browser windows or 2 tabs and doing something. Because it's a web and servers run for a long time. If it didn't happen today, it may happen next week or next month for different user. So how to deal with this situation? Session object alone is thread safe. So it is thread safe to add object and update object, like update it means replace object inside of session. So it is thread safe to insert object, take it out, replace, but data inside of object is not thread safe. Okay? Because it's your responsibility. So developers did what they could do the best. They made session object itself as thread safe. So set attribute, get attribute, fine, it will never cause issue. But data inside of the object is not thread safe because it's your responsibility. What objects do I have? Only one object, which is problem, is stored inside of session. And this object does not contain any changeable data. So it's impossible to change data inside of this object after you create it, and you insert it into session only after you create one. So why it is perfect? It is perfect because you cannot corrupt data by writing and reading at the same time, or writing and writing at the same time, if you don't have an option to write. Just because it's not writable object, you cannot corrupt the data. Is it the always best strategy? It's a strategy, I would say, but maybe not the best, because eventually we may run into a situation when we need an object where we need to change data. Right? So although it is perfectly thread safe in this situation, we may have to deal with this issue later. Right? If we need to store object that we need to update. So next example will show how to deal with it specifically, right? But for this example, I didn't finish yet explanation. So what time is it? Oh, but the explanation is short. We can finish it. So I want to link between simplest version and the default version here. In the simplest version, quiz service is marked with service. It means this mark service tells the system, call the constructor when you need this object. Okay. Which constructor? This constructor. Because it cannot call constructor with the parameter because it doesn't know where to get the parameter. So it will call this constructor. When would it need this object? It needs to create a controller object in order to initialize the entire program. So in order to create controller object, it will check, oh, this constructor needs quiz service. So it will call constructor of quiz service, inject it into constructor call here, call it constructor injection. Quiz service is dependency. It is dependency injected into constructor, so this is why it's called the constructor injection, constructor dependency injection. And this is how this program is initialized. So fine, works great. What if you need to inject an object that is not your own object? What if this object is coming from the library? You cannot really open library and write a service on top of it and recompile it. Yeah, maybe it's an option, but it's not the good option, right? So we need to learn how to inject object that we cannot edit, right? We cannot edit code. So if it comes from some other source, like from library, it's one of the options. Another, we may inject object that needs to be customized before we inject it. For example, we call constructor with different parameter. Not default constructor, but constructor with parameter. Or we create the object and change default settings before we inject it. Also possible, right? So in a main branch, I'm showing how to create object and customize it before it is injected. In this, it is just the easiest option if you don't need to customize it before it is injected. And if you have access to the code of it. If you don't have access to the code of it, you cannot use it, right? You cannot edit. So let's switch to the main branch and see how it is done. In main branch, in source main, in service, quiz service doesn't have anything on top of it. Okay? It means I need to tell the system that it is injectable elsewhere. So I need to provide this information elsewhere. In my constructor, for controller still expects quiz service. Okay? So this configuration, how to create this object, is described not inside of service, but elsewhere, where in configuration. So I created a file called quiz configuration. Name of this file doesn't matter. It just had to be name of the class inside because of Java restriction, right? Name of the file must be name of the public class inside. But name is not important, but what is important is the name configuration on top. Okay. So another thing, I have methods inside of configuration. Some of it has word bean on top. So this is important. If method has a word bean on top, it's an instruction how to create object of this kind. In this case, quiz service. Okay. What it is, call this method. Okay. So it literally tells the system, if you need object of this kind, quiz service, call the method and it will return it to you. This is what you need. And this is how you can call another constructor. Okay. So I call this constructor with a parameter, but instead of using random, I'm calling secure random. Secure random, it's a class inheriting from random. In this case, I'm just fine with random. I'm just showing that you can replace class this way. Secure random is more random than random. It's used in encryption, like security, encryption, decryption. So result is harder to hack. Okay. In this case, it's not necessary. It is just a demo that we can customize an object before it is injected. So it's not just default constructor call. Before we go to a second example, I want to show something that is not critically important to this problem, but since we also learned Java in this course, it is useful from Java point of view. You probably noticed that this problem, like many other problems, display data into logs, print data into logs, so we can debug it easily. And we also learned that toString method, overriding toString method inside of classes, helps a lot in terms of printing data into some log file or any other file on the screen. So far, we generated strings in toString method by just joining them with plus sign. String plus number plus another string plus comma in quotation mark plus something. So this is how we were building strings. It works, but in some situations, you can consider other choices. So in this case, as a demo, I use a different approach. So when I printed problem in this string, instead of joining these strings and numbers using plus sign, I use a template, similarly to what you have had in your course called computer languages when you learned about C. When you learn C, you remember that in order to print some string or number, you typically use it printf. If you need to print into file, it was fprintf. If you need to print into string, it was sprintf. But logic of these printfs functions was similar. And you can use the same logic in Java if you want. So let's look. In the model, I have problem, and in the problem, I define it to string by calling toString format. And the logic of toString format is similar to printf or sprintf, where you have template with markers to insert data, comma, and data. From the previous course, you remember that %d it is marker to insert integer, right? So it's a marker like stands for digits, right? The same way you can also format it by specific number of widths, paddings with 0. You can format double, right, this way, and when you insert it, it will be %f with specification of widths entire field, widths after dot. So it's all flexible and absolutely available in Java.